So we tend to talk a lot about AI on this podcast, but honestly, none of the three of us are experts. But do you know two people who are experts? Two people who could probably bore you to death with all of their AI chat? Stefan and Joshua from our sponsors, PropTex. They are absolutely at the forefront of using AI to enhance real estate portal listings, and they're doing some other really cool stuff involving, in listing furniture shopping. We're going to have Stefan on the podcast soon to talk about that. It's genuinely really interesting. If you're interested in learning a bit more about what PropTex does, head to PropTex, that's with 2x's.com, or hit the guys up on LinkedIn. Obviously, say that we sent you. And on with the podcast. Hello and welcome to the PPW pod, bringing you news, views, and interviews from the world of real estate marketplaces. My name's Edmund Keith. I'm the editor of onlinemarketplaces.com, joined for today's episode by Marcos Leite, all the way from Brazil, GM of OLX Brazil's real estate division. Marcos, how are you doing?
I am doing excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Cool. Why don't you begin? Because one of the things we were just saying off camera then is that a lot of our listeners are from all around the world. Maybe a lot of people won't have such a great idea of the Brazilian market and also of OLX Brazil. OLX Brazil, to many people's minds, they'll just think OLX, horizontal classifieds, but that's not really the case. Why don't you give the listeners a bit of a sense of the company that is OLX Brazil?
Yes, excellent. Thank you, Ed. Well, first of all, a bit of a correction on my title. As of a year ago, I'm actually managing more verticals within the OLX Brazil, and I used to run only real estate. So it's a bit of an update on that.
I actually looked at your LinkedIn before we did this.
Yeah,
That's on me. I should have written it down. Sorry.
no, that's all good. So about OLX Brazil. So I've actually been here since the beginning practically. So I joined in December of 2012. And I think the company has gone through many different stages. So number one is the leading generalist in Brazil. So OLX, together with Bom Negócio, they created the category of classifieds in the market. And in 2015, there was a merger between the two leading players, which gave birth to the new OLX Brazil, which was basically 50-50 JV between Adevinta and Process. And then we started actually monetizing the two main verticals, which was real estate and autos. Very soon after that merger, we realized that we were number one in volume in autos, and went on to actually monetize that category extremely well over the years. And we did very well in real estate, but we were number 4. And then we saw between that period of 2015 and 2020, we saw Zappi and VR actually merge with each other at the end of 2017. And then we had the opportunity to actually acquire them in 2020. And that's when we saw the opportunity to actually become number one in this market. And that's how this came about. And between 2020 and 2024, basically, I was running the real estate vertical and actually turning that around in a way and actually becoming the de facto a leader in the Brazilian market. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the story of 12 years in 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Can you give our listeners a sense of how big is the Brazilian market? We know, Brazil's a big country, but does it have a big real estate market? Can you give us a sense of maybe the GTV in the market and, also maybe some of the possibilities that are still out there?
Yeah, so it is a big market, right? 200 million people live in Brazil. Official numbers are that there are about 1 million transactions, basically buy and sell transactions per year. The rental market is very big. There's about 19 million rental properties in Brazil happening every year. So it is a big market, and it's a market that actually is over time going to continue growing, whether it's for sale, whether it's for rent. And but Brazil is a continental country, right? So if you think about if you look at the size of the country, there's many different segments, there are many different levels of purchasing power in the population. So what that means in the end is that there's a very big gray market as well in the real estate market, right? And that's a bit of a complexity when it comes to the portal. And I think we can get to that in a bit. Just like many, I was just telling you a little bit earlier, it's when it comes to Brazil and when it comes to classifieds world, I think it's a bit of a tale of two different realities. There's a developed world and the developing world. what you usually see in the developing world like Brazil is that you see a non-exclusive market, which means that a non-exclusive market means that it's not organized. And at the end, it's up to the portals or other players to actually try to organize that. And in the case of Brazil, we actually have the highest commission rate in the world, which is 6% for sale property.
Is
So in
that
a nutshell, that's
6%
also
across the market? Is that, just top end of the market, or is that pretty
no,
broad
that's
across
across
the
the
market?
market. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you see ranges coming down to maybe 4.5%, 5%, but that's actually all you see across the
Okay. I apologize for my son, by the way. He's just had
market. It's all
a
good.
vaccine. He's just come home from the doctors. He's had a vaccination, so he might be, he's not in a great
It's all
mood.
good. It's all
So
good.
talking about the Brazilian market a bit more, what's the kind of, so you said that there's a bit of educating to do on the part of real estate portals to agents. What's the kind of the brokerage landscape? Is it, like how consolidated is it? Are there, these big conglomerates that pay a lot of money to portals that get a lot of, these fat commissions? Or is it still in need of a lot of consolidation and a lot of education from portals to kind of tell real estate agents that actually putting your listings online is a good thing? Like, where are you on the kind of scale of that?
Yeah, you see all kinds. I think this gray market that I mentioned brings some complexity to that. So no, you don't see groups that kind of dominate the entire Brazilian market as a whole, right? What we see in Brazil is that it's very regional. So the top brokers in Rio are totally different than the top brokers in São Paulo, who are very different from the top brokers in Curitiba, who are very different top brokers in Porto Alegre, right? So it's a very fragmented and very regional with basically local players that are very relevant. So it's fragmented in that sense. So when you look for in a market like Brazil, we tend not to look so much nationally, but we really break down operation regionally. And we look, okay, so what is the strategy for São Paulo versus Rio, right? And how much money you need to invest there, and what is the education going to look like? Because São Paulo state by itself has 40 million people, right? It's like Spain, right, or something of that sort. So that brings also a lot of, let's say, the dimension is very big, and also brings complexity to that. And also the purchasing power is very different, right? São Paulo basically commands a lot of the most of the purchasing power in Brazil. Say for us, for example, right, it's about 35% of the revenue is concentrated in São Paulo,
Okay.
which is something you'd see maybe in Russia, like what happens in Moscow, for example, right?
Yeah,
But
that
there's
was actually, that was the
yeah,
example in my head, actually. I was going to ask. So it's very regional, and Sao Paulo's what, 35% of revenue, and it's a huge market. Obviously, you guys are, when we plot a spreadsheet of who is the market leader, it's OLX Brazil. But are you the market leader everywhere? Because I remember, I think it was your competitor that bought a real estate portal in one of the kind of regions out there. And I was sat there thinking, well, why have they done that? It doesn't seem, it doesn't seem to make sense. I imagine that there are some regional real estate portals out there that do quite well just within their region. Would that be fair to say?
yeah, maybe over time that has changed a little bit. I guess I think a few years ago that was more competitive than it is today. Today, especially given that we have 3 portals, we have been able to actually grow our presence significantly across all regions of Brazil. But I would say, especially in the south of Brazil, if you look at Porto Alegre or Curitiba, I'd say that is still more competitive than if you say in regions like São Paulo or Rio, or even like the center or the north of Brazil. We are by far market leaders. And it also depends a lot on what you say, or you define as market leadership. For me, it's just very,
Oh,
very
yeah.
clear. If you talk about revenue, we are market leaders everywhere, right? Without a doubt.
Yeah, that's a classic email that I receive whenever I say mention market leadership. I get an email from somebody saying, "Well, it depends how depends how you define market leadership, etc., etc." Speaking of competition, I think over the last 5 years, I have written more headlines about your competitor than I have about OLX Brazil, probably by a ratio of like 3-1. Now, that's not because you guys are doing anything wrong necessarily. It's kind of the nature of your competitor, Quinto Andar, Loft to an extent. They're these like these brands that have attracted a lot of VC investment and with it a lot of headlines and a lot of kind of buzz, let's say. What is it like operating in a market when you've got these competitors with so much kind of buzz and kind of international attention on them? Um, is it maybe a little bit frustrating, or is it just, we're in our lane, we're doing our thing, we don't pay attention to outside noise?
Uh, well, it's a bit of everything. I think first of all, I think competition is great, right? I think it keeps us sharp, it keeps us focused. This kind of competition, it doesn't happen in every market, especially innovative models, right? So I think I think it's important for the consumer. And I think it's good for the industry as a whole, right? So I think I welcome it, greatly. Second thing is, I would say with both of those companies, we were more competitors in the past than we are today, because they're still different models, right? I think if you talk about classifieds pure play, which in the end that's all we do, they're really not competitors of ours in that sense, because maybe Kindle are a bit more because they bought Immobilweb a few years ago, but they're not really operating that classifieds business. Is actually, I think our leadership towards Immobilweb has gone up a lot over the last 3 years. And Loft, as you know, has pivoted completely their model. Right? I think they tried going to classifieds in the beginning where there's a lot of money, but then have gone into basically being this kind of brokers kind of model, right? So I think we see them today more as potential partners of ours and actual competitors in that sense, So I think everybody understands kind of like where they are, and I think that everybody's focusing on where they actually add more value, And in the end, as you said, a classifieds pure play with the leadership that we have is actually quite hard to disrupt. If you look at I think many players around the world trying to disrupt the number one player with the homes.com that you guys have covered extensively over the last few months. It's actually hard that is in the end, So I think everybody's kind of seeing that there's a lot of opportunity in the market. There's a lot of opportunity to professionalize the market, and I'm happy that there's players out there that are helping to do it as well. But yeah, we're keeping our lane and we're doing our thing, and I think we're doing very good at doing that.
Okay, so not tempted. So you're saying you're staying in your lane, but not tempted to do some of the kind of funkier business models that we've seen in other Latin American markets. So, obviously Quinto Andar and what they do with rental guarantees and all the rest of it. At this point, it's not, it's been around for a while, but when it came out, it was very innovative. We've heard from the likes of Ricardo Frechu from 360 Latam and how they've completely kind of revolutionized their business model. You guys not considering, changing what you do at all?
No, we are. It's just that it's so a bit of a context on that, right? And then I'll go back to the headlines part you also asked. Okay, so we have launched as well a product which is the rental guarantee, which is a bit different because what Nintendo does is that they are brokers themselves, and then they offer that service to their own clients, right, and their own users. They were going the direction of actually offering as well to third parties, but actually have discontinued that publicly over like about 2 months ago. Loft acquired Credit Pago, which does exactly that, which is basically offering rental guarantees, but then to brokers. And we actually have a competitor of that, which is a partnership with Creditas, which is basically one of the biggest financing startups in Brazil today. And and that business is actually going quite well. But it's a different business. One is a transactional business, one is a pure play classified. So we actually have to be very careful on separating those two things. And we are actually very bullish about this going forward, because if you look at the total rental market, going back to the numbers I told you at the beginning of the call, there's about basically 19 million rental properties in Brazil. And combined, basically all players that do rental guarantees are basically doing a small percentage of that. I'll say the number today, the market is probably 1.5 million total contracts under this kind of model. So the opportunity is really big. Opportunity is really big also because the rental we call that experience in Brazil is particularly hard. Whereas not a lot of people have money for deposits. Basically rental insurance is extremely expensive. People have the money to do that. So having basically a solution where you don't have to pay upfront and you're just going to take a take rate of the monthly rent is a lot more welcoming for most people, right? Of course, and there's a risk in this market, right? Because there's a lot to do with credit, right? And in a market like Brazil, when a big change happens, you need to provision a lot of this credit as well, and that can actually make or break the model. So it's something that we are starting to do and having some success. I think today we're doing about it's the 20,000 rental contracts, which is not at the same level of Loft, for example, which is significantly more than that, but we started much later. Right? But we see is that we see that we want to be in this market, and as I said before, we need to be very careful not to make it compete with our classifieds, because expectations here is that we have a high growth and high margin, especially, and this kind of business can really kill your margin over time. So we are doing it more from a VC kind of perspective and operating it kind of like separately in that sense. But it's important to be part of it, because the rental market in Brazil is going to keep on growing. The interest rates in Brazil went from 3% back in 2021, and suddenly, well, at first went to like 12%. Now we're actually 15% now in Brazil. So basically, the transactional business is only happening in the very low end market or the luxury market. It's not really happening in the mid market as much as it was before, and people are opting to rent more than they are to buy. So it's important to actually capture this.
Wow, 15% is crazy. I know in the US at the moment, people are complaining about 7%. 15% is wild. Why is that? What, just help me understand why. So we were talking before off camera a little bit about the distinction between what on my spreadsheet are developed markets and developing markets. And I was saying to you that for me, in some regards, maybe I can see parts of Brazil as, developed market, right? But then you have things like these rental guarantee businesses, which are thriving on what I interpret as a complete lack of trust. And then you have this massive spike in interest rates from, what was it, 3 to 15%. Can you give me a sense of like what's bringing these, what does Brazil as a nation, or what does the real estate market need to do to kind of get past some of these things? And what maybe, a real estate portal with such a big leadership and footprint can, do to help the country get to that? I know it seems like quite a grandiose question, and maybe it's not your responsibility, but it seems to me like there is a role for a huge company, a huge brand, a market leader to play in all of this, if you see what I mean.
No, I see exactly what you mean, and I think it's a very important question. I mean, so what can we do, right? Because that's like why it happened. In the way, we're kind of glad it happens, right? Because if the central bank wasn't increasing interest rates, inflation would be in a completely different place, So it's kind of like the state of the country, So it's a bit of the Brazilian or the emerging market risk, right? So many emerging markets don't, some emerging markets have even worse interest rates, So it's a bit of reality. And as I was saying earlier, right? I think it's it's when you talk about developing and developed markets, when you talk to many markets across Europe, there's a belief that interest rates do not matter when you are market leader. It should not basically hurt your monetization. Yeah, but if you're going from 2 to 4%, it's different if you're going from 2 to 15%. Then because when such a big change happens, what happens? The broker just say, you know what, I need to take my time to understand what's happening. Am I going to keep on being in this market, or am I going to get out of it? And a lot of them actually get out of it. Like, look, this is never going to happen for me, So that impacts the business in the end, because we are a listing business in the end, right? Content is our main thing, So when that first shock happens, we do see an impact. But in the end, if you look at the actual numbers, right? So we were doing about 1.3 million transactions back in 2021 in Brazil when rates are low, and that actually went down to 1 million. So we did lose a lot of transactions in that sense. But I think that's the opportunity where, the best actually come out in that period. And that's what we try to actually teach our brokers. Like, look, in the end, there's still 1 million transactions happening in the market. And with the retraction of the market, most that don't want to compete, they get out of it. So then there's a huge opportunity that actually concentrates a lot of transactions on the ones that really been operating for a long time, that actually service the customers in the best way. And actually try to teach them how to do that in a better way, So, and how do you do that, right? I think we've done a few things. One is through our product, of course. So one of the things that we have is that came with acquisition of Grupo Zap was a product called DataZap, which is basically the main pricing tool on the market. So it's also, even going back to what you said about headlines, actually we get a lot more headlines in the end because anything to do with pricing, be it on the news, on TV, or on newspapers or anything, we're basically citing our tool because it's the main pricing tool that covers every municipality in Brazil. So that's very important. Then we take that pricing and we actually give that as a product to our brokers. You're never going to be able to sell this property at 500,000. You're only going to be able to sell this property at 400,000. Have the data to be able to help them do that. So things like that we do. The second thing you have to do is you have to give them the capacity to do it. So we have the biggest event in the world today, I think, maybe not the world, maybe Latin America, which is Connect Imobi. We unite 7,000 brokers every year in São Paulo. And 7,000 is a lot of people. If you've been a place with 7,000 people in an event, it's a lot of people,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, we do conferences for around 400, and that's stressful
Yeah.
enough.
I was like, so this is like a massive operation. We spent it the whole year doing this. I actually have a full-time team actually just focused on this. And this is the main place where they are able to learn about what is happening in the market, what is happening abroad. We bring a lot of that, given that we're part of the biggest groups. So we actually bring a lot of credibility, and we're actually able to actually really build that towards the clients over the last 4 years, because we have information that nobody else can actually provide, and they become much better at it. And I'll say that third thing is actually looking to the future, right? I think I would say add that definitely with the rise of AI, I think we are going to an age where customer service, brokers, they no longer have an excuse not to have good service. And you'll know this because you've been covering real estate portals for a long time. I know their response rate, especially in the emerging market, extremely low, right? We looked at when I was presenting at this event last year, I was giving the brokers some data saying, look, on average, you guys are responding to a lead from our portal in 24 hours. Like in 24 hours, you basically already lost a client, right? Because their competitor that is responding within 7 minutes, he actually has a 70% chance of actually closing that deal in the end, right? But they don't have to do it anymore, right? Because now with agents, and we are providing agents now to our clients. Basically, there's no reason why they, so basically, I think we got rid of that problem that customer service no longer is bad. I think at least every customer is going to be heard and is going to be taken care of. Then it's just their job to really make sure that they're taken by the hand and actually get into the end of the transaction, So I think it's an exciting time.
Okay, I was just kind of thinking in my head there, where is the next big growth phase for OLX Brazil? So on the one hand, you've got a market that's still expanding, where if you just stay good at what you do, you're going to grow because the market's growing. On the one hand, you've got slightly different business models, but you can't expand too far into transactional things because you are a leading classifieds entity and you can't take away some business from your customers. And then you've got this other kind of adjacent, let's call it an adjacent revenue stream, what you kind of alluded to there, of just operationally doing things a bit better and offering services to specifically to agents, but potentially to users as well, where you guys are competent, you're a big brand, you can use AI to sell new products or anything. Which of those, I mean, broadly speaking, those are the three paths I have in my head. Which of those three things do you see as your big avenue of growth over the next 5 years?
Yeah. No, so I think just very quick, I think it's important to understand the context, right? I think today, when you look at our real estate business, is actually doing quite well, especially if you look at what happened since we acquired Grupo Zap. When we acquired a company, it was actually flat in revenue. It was a CAGR of 0% over 3 years and actually losing money. And today it's a company or it's a business that's growing double digits, and we're going to end the year at about 50% margin, which is very, very, very impressive for actually for emerging market. I don't know how much my investors would be happy that I shared it, but it's okay. I think it's just important for the industry to know that it can be done.
One of your shareholders is a public company, so it ends up on a spreadsheet somewhere that I can have a look at. So it's okay.
Yeah, and then Yeah, but what we see going forward is that this double-digit growth can accelerate a lot, right? So really accelerate a lot. So and that's what we plan for the next few years. So and how we see that happening, right? As you said, the market is going to grow, especially certain segments are growing, and we are basically at the forefront of that to make sure that we grow together with it. As you know, how classifieds works, right? Is that as we become bigger and we invest, we're the biggest investors in marketing as well in the market. We want to make sure that our leadership continues to be strong. It means that we are going to command increasingly more of the results and more of the sales that our customers actually get. So that means we actually get a fair price for that. It means that we can do price increases. We also see that a massive opportunity is a primary market. So going back to focus, right? When we acquired Grupo Zap, there are two things that I did back then. One is to kill the iBuyer business. And the second thing was pause our new developments initiative because it was not being well run. And it's a business that needs a lot of focus, and we had time for it. And if you actually fast forward 3 years to today, we decided to pause it, and we did not see any kind of competitors take away or become bigger than market because it's so difficult to get big from a classifieds perspective, right? And now we're focusing big time on that now. So and really see that that in a market like Brazil, the primary market can be as big as our secondary market, which is a market that does more than $100 million a day in revenue, right? So so that's a big avenue for us for growth. And we see like basically two adjacencies that are very important. One is going big on financing, but not operating ourselves. So we do see this happening through very strategic partnerships, and not necessarily to a bank, but basically through what do you call it, like a brokerage, a financing brokerage. You guys have a name for it specifically in English, I forgot now. And a mortgage brokerage, as I call it. And then also through, we see things like rental guarantees being an important avenue for growth, even that rental is going to be very big. But those other two they probably will not be as big as basically our main classified business. Basically secondary and primary market. So so this is really important for us, right? And we do that. How we do that? We do that by supporting our brands. So especially Zap, we're going to keep on investing in our brand, keep on investing our marketing to actually support that growth. And making sure that our leadership in terms of users continues to be really big. Today we're about close to 3 times bigger than number 2, and we need to make sure that keeps on increasing.
Okay, you mentioned there that the primary market is a potential really big growth area for you guys, but you've also said we don't want to get into the transaction. We don't want to upset our clients. We have seen, or there are examples out there, especially in developing markets, of big classifieds players who have done transactional models in the primary market and not necessarily angered, their core customer base, who maybe aren't necessarily involved in the primary real estate market. Are you tempted to change the business model a little bit to something more transactional when it comes to the primary market, or not really?
Totally not. And I've done a full 180 on that. When we first started looking at the primary market, and this is of course many years ago, this went before Grupo Zap, back in 2017. It was already a big opportunity then. It continues to be a big opportunity now. My idea was like, look, this needs to be a transaction model to work. And we actually, got very inspired by what Imran was doing with the MPG back then. But then you actually get to the details of it. What the MPG did was very specific to a situation in Pakistan. And if you actually look at the situation in Brazil, it's not a model that it doesn't need to be transactional for this to actually work. What you see is that these real estate developers are actually quite sophisticated in Brazil. Surprisingly, they've actually come to be very sophisticated. If you actually go and visit them, you see the operation. They actually work very well. So they don't need a transaction. They can take care of the transaction themselves. What they need a very, very strong marketing channel, and we can be that for them, right? To many different ways, both through our audience, but also through our pricing, right? And we have actually different products that allow them to do that because of this pricing. Product that I told you about called Data Zap, you actually have a different called Joy Mobile, which is basically helping them, or we do projects to actually help them actually plan out their next development, So actually our relationship with them is quite strong in the end, so actually going out deep into this market in terms of having a product that needs to be very different from a secondary market, because a listing is not so simple for primary market, because within a compound you can have 7 different types of apartments, and we need to make sure that that's shown in a way that is simple to the audience. It needs to be much deeper, so the depth of the product needs to be much better than what a secondary listing needs to look like. So that's what we're doing. You really focus on the product first to make sure that that is best in class, and then we're going to see basically the monetization come from that.
Okay, very well answered. It's the time of the podcast now. It's normally about this time, about half an hour in, where we start to mention AI, because it's an inevitable point that we always get to, right? Now, where do I want to go with this? I spent the first kind of 2.5 months of this year looking at all the real estate portals in the world, looking at what they're doing with AI. Specifically, do they have any kind of AI search, right? And what I broadly found was that most real estate portals don't have a pure like AI search text box. What a lot of real estate portals, including Zap, certainly are doing is going down a slightly different route of using AI or using machine learning to learn about the user and give them highly personalized suggestions instead. I did a presentation about this at our Bangkok conference, and basically, to be honest, I was kind of complaining that I want to see more real estate portals giving people just a free box where they can search for whatever they want. So I've got you here now. You guys have obviously decided to go down the kind of personalized suggestion route here. Why is that? Is it the fact that you're not comfortable giving control to users to write whatever they want into a box? Or is it something to do with, we don't want, we want to control the listings that they're seeing in the end? Like, give me an idea of how the decision gets made on that one.
Yes. So first, I'll give a spoiler: is that we are testing this kind of
Okay.
box.
I
So,
suspect
but
there are a
I'll
lot of
get
people that are testing the box. Okay.
yes, yeah. But I'll give some context, right? So again, it's a tale of a developing market versus a developed market, right? So if you look at a country like Brazil, where you need to look at literacy rate, for example, is much lower than the developed market, for example. And I'll go back a few years, right? When we were discussing a few years not about AI, I was like, look, should we go straight away for a map-like experience, or should we actually go to a filter-like experience, right? And it was a big discussion, right? Because I know the Airbnb likes the map, right? And should we go in that direction as well? And whenever you actually tested that out, was actually saw that in the first 5 years ago, most people didn't understand the map. Yes, some people loved it, so we give the option because they know exactly where they want to live. A lot of people don't even know where in the map the neighborhood is, right? So basically, a simple listing solution or actually have filters is something that most people understand. I think that's also the beauty of classifieds, is that it's super simple, and people can just look at it and they just get it. How they should go about their search. But having said that, the things have changed a lot with this AI. We were discussing a lot. Look, is this actually is it just a fad or not? I think there's different opinions about this, even in the stock with different portals. But in the end, I don't think it's a fad. I think it's real, and I think it's real because we also see that today about 5% of the audience on our real estate portals actually coming from the language models, and this audience actually converts about 4 times more than a regular audience. So it's something very, very, very special that's happening. And something specific about Brazil or developing world is that people they text less and do voice messages more, right? So voice is extremely important when it comes to language models, right? So that is something that we are really testing with right now. I think we'll have more news very, very soon on this, because in the end, people want to either people just want to have a more specific search, and they don't want to go about doing 1,000 different filters. The world has changed over the last 5 years, and if I want to have a house that is that's been renovated over the last 6 months, and I wanted to make sure that it was well renovated with specific products, That's stuff that's very hard to have a filter for, right? And so they will have enough history on listings and a good enough quality on listings that we have helped our clients do that. Yeah, that we actually can have good output out of those models, and that's something that we are that we're certainly testing with, So yeah, so that's something that that's important for us. Something that it's going to be out soon. I don't think it's going to replace straight away our main search. I think we are going to give it as an option. Yeah, but that's where we are on that front. And as I mentioned as well, on the client side, on the broker side, we are using this to basically improve the customer experience in terms of them not having to do the customer service themselves, and an agent, which is basically the Zap agent, actually doing that for them. And that's something that's already being it's already an actual product that's already with a few of our clients, and we're going to be talking a lot about it in our big event in September.
Okay. So I'm just thinking there. So you guys are testing, what we're talking about, this box where you can say or type whatever you want from your property search. Now, to kind of come back to that presentation I did and the research I did, the kind of conclusion of it was I suspected that a lot of real estate portals haven't gone down this path yet because they're scared of losing money. Because when you give the user more control over what they want, they'll probably find their dream home much quicker without seeing all the extra kind of premium listings, and maybe without sending some kind of semi-useless leads. Firstly, is that a fair characterization of the situation? And secondly, when you make a decision to build, a pure AI search box, do you, in the board meeting or whatever, have to broach the subject of eventually we're going to lose money here because people won't see as many premium listings? Or is it framed as actually this is just a better experience all round and we have to do it because otherwise we'll get overtaken?
Well, I think it's definitely the former than the latter. But I think that pushes us to have to find other ways to monetize. Because in the end, the main thing that our clients want is that they want a more assertive lead in the end, right? I think the more that we can generate that, and we can actually do that in different ways, right? Through financing leads, you can do that as well. Through similar properties, you can do that as well. And I don't know if necessarily it is the not having the premium listings that is the main factor here. I think as we test out that experience, we're going to see what the numbers say, and then we just have to factor that into what that means in terms of conversion for our clients. And as long as we keep on converting at the same level or above, we're going to get a fair share of our revenue. So, but we have to be careful with it, right? Let's test. Let's see what the adoption is. I don't think the adoption is going to be that strong in the beginning because a lot of people just, most people are laggards, right? So I think we have some time to still think about the monetization of it. Yeah. So that's how I see it.
At the very least, we'll give you a nice headline on onlinemarketplaces.com when the press release lands in my inbox. You'll get that at least.
Exactly.
Another question I mean, obviously that's an exciting feature that you guys are working on. Is there any other kind of exciting product or feature or service that you guys are working on that really excites you at the moment?
I mean, I told you about kind of like the rental guarantee. I think that's interesting. I talked about the finance. I think that's interesting. We're just making also this a core experience much better and much faster, right? So if you look, for example, at our map experience, for example, I think map together with basically search is going to be. I don't think the box search of AI is necessarily going to take over the map experience. I think people are going to want to actually go in between both of them. I think we see a lot of developed markets where you have basically this feature called I think you'll know the name of it better than me, which is time. Was it time?
Time travel time search.
Travel time. There you go. Travel time search. Thank you. We have a bit of a different name here in Portuguese. But once you have a good map experience with good location, I think you're actually able to provide a much better experience in that sense. The difficulty in Brazil is that brokers, because they're non-exclusive markets, brokers don't want to give the exact location of their properties, and that becomes a massive problem for teachers like this. So that's why education is going to continue to be very important in a market like Brazil. First, we'll have features like that, but yeah. But we focus a lot on that. So we have improved substantially the map experience over the last 6 months. We see the adoption has actually more than doubled to the map experience instead. So it's very significant. So yeah. So I think as we develop and we are the biggest portals, we see that innovation from the user perspective will also come with it. So yeah, I think it's exciting.
Okay. So we've kind of come in the space of about 40 minutes. We've kind of, for me, encapsulated what makes the industry quite interesting, because we've gone from talking about things that are very specific, very nuanced, very relevant to the Brazilian market, full circle to talking about things that are very relevant to, the small number of real estate portals that exist everywhere in the world. And this is kind of our job at online marketplaces, Property Portal Watch, is trying to make what you're doing in Brazil relevant for somebody in Australia or Sweden or whatever. So I guess my question here is, as somebody who runs a real estate portal, who probably has, I don't know how many meetings a day, who has all kinds of headaches and worries and things that you have to do, how much do you pay attention to news and analysis from other places around the world? And how useful is it to you to see, I don't know, a story from Germany or South Africa or wherever? Like, what parallels are there that are useful? Because obviously the real estate markets, are completely different here.
No, it's very useful, and that's I'm I'm a big reader of your articles and many around the world, and I join the Property Portal conference every year to actually meet a lot of these portal leaders as well, to get inspired by what they're doing, and actually very close to a lot of them as well, right? To see like what is something that we don't have to reinvent the wheel on. That we see how when we see innovation in these markets, we want to follow along. So for example, right, when you look at basically innovative monetization models, I think I'm very interested in that. Right? So for example, right, we are rethinking our monetization in Brazil from slots to basically a different kind of model. And we got inspired by this by looking at what the guys in Russia did, for example, right? And we see that can be actually very similar markets. So what this can actually really work in Brazil and actually simplify and make things much easier to monetize in the future. So we're very close to that. Other things we look at is, as I said earlier about homes.com and Zillow, etc. We talk about and also what happened in England with Rightmove is looking at leaders getting disrupted. Is that a possibility or not, and what are ways it's actually happening? You'll recall, right, that many years ago we all thought that transactional business was completely going to disrupt classifieds, and everybody started going that direction, and everybody basically got back, right? iBuying was the future. A lot of people stopped doing that, So it's a very resilient kind of market, So, but we have to keep on being smart and paying attention to that, So yeah, very interested, and yeah, it is local nuances, but in the end, you can still get inspired and see if you can be smarter about it, And I think there's a lot that we can learn from.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for being nice about us. By the way, for people listening, you can catch Marcos at Property Portal Watch in October. I believe we've signed you up as a speaker. There's certainly an email thread asking you to be a speaker, and you said yes. We can talk about it after when we hang up. But
yeah,
excellent speaker, someone we've had on before, somebody who we love hearing from, always does a great presentation. Marcos, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate people like you taking the time to come and share what you're doing, share what you've learned with the real estate portals from around the world. So thank you very much.
It's a pleasure, Ed. See you soon.